hear me? Yay! Jennifer Klammer is a Benton County Master Gardener. She's been a member since 2011, a while. She was born and raised in the Willamette Valley with farming in her roots. Her first job as an 8th grader was transplanting celery and other vegetables in her grandparents' greenhouses. Her interest in growing vegetable starts expanded with leading the Giving Garden, a church garden with the mission of providing a place for people to learn about gardening and donating produce to local food banks. She co-leads the 4-H Garden Gnomes Horticulture and Beekeeping Club, interesting name, which grows plants for the Giving Garden and for their fundraiser. Jennifer also coordinates the team that grows thousands of vegetable starts for the Benton County Master Gardener Plant Sale, which is coming up, and you probably all have bought some of her vegetable starts at one point or another. I'm going to ask you to please welcome Jennifer Klammer.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, did you all get handout, by the way, since they came in? Well, did anybody besides me? Thank you.
I decided it was more important for me to eat lunch than get here super early. Sorry if you didn't get a handout right away. Today we're talking about starting seeds inside. And specifically, you'll notice in my title, I changed it up. They asked me to speak about asters to zinnias, or asters to zucchini. I don't have so much experience with the aster part. I really have a lot of experience in vegetables, but as we go along, if there's questions that you have, and it can apply to flowers or perennials or natives or other things, please ask questions as we go through. This is the basic nuts and bolts to seed starting. This is not the elaborate high-end, you need everything and spend a lot of money for it. This is seed starting at its basics. So today we'll talk about what to expect. You already know what to expect. What seeds need to grow. And we'll talk about light, heat, soil, air, and nutrients, and specifically look at what you would need to do indoors in your house to do that. In order to prove that I could actually grow vegetables in my own house, I did a little experiment. So, Master Gardeners are research-based, so this was my really intensive research, N equals 1. But I did want to make this a really practical application for seed starting. We'll talk about transplanting your starts, hardening off starts, watching for different stress signs, and then we'll do a little foray into talking about seeds. Janet outlined what I've done. I mostly wanted to highlight, most of the growing that I've experienced has been done in either an unheated greenhouse, small 8x12 one, or the larger one that we use out at Philomath High School, which is a 30-foot by 45-foot heated hoop house. So the cushiest of cushy conditions that you could want. I imagine most of us don't have that kind of access on a regular basis. The things I've grown, again, are vegetables, herbs, and the flowers I've mostly focused on are for pollinators, bouquets, and deer-resistant flowers. All right, so how many of you have grown plants from seeds? Show of hands. That's what I thought. So you all have some experience here. So we all have some experience and stories to share. So when I ask about ideas, it is just kind of a free form. Bring your ideas out. It doesn't have to be, the scientific research, etc. It's just like what has worked for you and what has been successful or not so successful for you. How many of you have started seeds indoors in your house? How many have started seeds in an unheated greenhouse? A heated greenhouse. Oh, there's some of you who have the cushy stuff. Well, you might have some stories to share. And just shout it out. Why are you interested in starting seeds indoors? More varieties available, absolutely.
Bringing them from overseas when you can't bring plant starts.
Okay, it's easier to bring seeds in from overseas rather than plants. Somebody said fun, absolutely. Cheaper than buying starts. Well, it depends, right? You can calculate all the costs. You can get started earlier, yes. All right, so there's a lot of great reasons to grow seeds indoors in your house. But seeds need all the basics to really do well and for you to be successful there. So we'll hit on light and heat, soil, water, area, and nutrients. So light, 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 light. If you don't take anything else home from this, light is probably the hardest thing to do in a home setting. So light for vegetables, to seed and germinate and grow well, need 12 to 16 hours a day. If you look, I think this was last week's time. Sunrise at 7:15, sunset at 5:37 p.m. So if you have ideal 24-hour access to light inside your house, it's still not hitting the 12 to 16 hours that vegetables will do best at. Take-home lesson, it's very highly unlikely that you'll have those ideal conditions in your house. Anybody here have ideal conditions in their house? Janet, because what do you do? She has a sunroom and she has heat lights, so she's still, even though she has a sunroom, notice she has the heat lights. So even if you have the best sun, you still probably need to get a little more light in there. So there's all kinds of light options. We're not going to go high-tech into this. Fluorescent, cool white, full spectrum. You can do one bulb hot, one bulb cool, one bulb warm.
Any difference between fluorescent and LED?
So I have not personally used LEDs. They are finally coming down in price. Fluorescent has been the most accessible. I have not done the research on LEDs. Have you had experience with LEDs?
No, it's like the light is in the same spectrum.
Yes,
And they just don't give off heat.
yes, yes.
So
Compact fluorescent already?
Compact fluorescent, any fluorescent. So I'll show you in my experiment what I ended up doing. LEDs. So the other important thing is that you want an adjustable, it doesn't have to be stand. You want your lighting to be adjustable because some plants will, if you have your, fluorescence up on the ceiling, the plants will really, really want to stretch to reach that. So even 4 inches is really close, right? So having that adjustability is important. Timer obviously is optional, but if you're like me and they're in the back room somewhere, it's 6 o'clock at night, and go, shoot, I forgot to turn on the lights. So a timer, I have light timers, so it's easy. I mean, just the plug in the wall kind. So here's some a commercially available light stand with the adjustable pulley system on it. This is a single bulb here. Here's a do-it-yourself PVC pipe with 2 sets of 2s on there, so you're getting 4. Here's a bookshelf thing with lights mounted in it. Other solutions you can do, craft light, I've done that. I've used my son's aquarium lights, if the aquarium is not busy, so you put your plants in there. So you can, yeah, he was in college, he didn't under the kitchen cabinet, so a lot of cabinets have those fluorescent lights in there. They're kind of small usually, fluorescent or LED, but that might be a solution. If you need to get 4 to 6 weeks of light, that might be a way to do it. On existing furniture that you have, you can mount some books in there and create light that way. Other ideas, other solutions that people have used for lighting. Yeah. That PVC one is cool. I priced it out. It was actually, because I thought, I should make one, but I didn't. A question over here.
Very inexpensive way, just get some chain that will hold it, so it has still, and keep it on the ceiling, or even a little shelf that sticks out. You can put the lamp, any kind of lamp on that,
Yes.
and then just raise it as it grows.
Yes, so the comment is you can get the chains with the little S hooks. You can get this at True Value or Home Depot. You can even buy them by the foot, you know, and get the little S hooks on there so you can easily make them adjustable. You don't have to have the fancy pulley systems and stuff. Okay, should I admit what I did? Oh, actually, I'll tell you what I do. My experiment.
Can mount hooks on the ceiling.
Yes, can mount hooks on the ceiling. So that's what my son's setup was with when he had plants, and then I stole his stuff. Okay, next important thing is heat. A lot of people said, you know, why do you do it? You can get an earlier start. Well, really, you can't grow tomatoes and peppers and other things here because we have too short a season. So you can get an even earlier start if you start your own indoors and don't rely on the local stores to get them. This is a chart that came out. I just took a small section of the chart to give you the range of cooler crops to warmer crops and what the optimal temperature is to grow those crops. Watermelon likes it hot. My 4-H kids always know the first thing they put on their list of what I want to grow. Watermelon. So it's always, you don't want to discourage them, but it's always a little challenging for them to get more than one watermelon. Hopefully they'll get at least one. But the key take home I want you to look at is what is the range here? I hope everybody heats their house to more than 60 degrees, right? When you look at the minimums here, you can grow even those hottest heat-loving plants at 60 degrees. So heat is probably not the limiting factor in your house. It's probably still going to be light. So optimal germination is 70 to 95. I looked up these charts because on my experiment I wanted to be able to target a temperature for the range of plants that I was doing so I could portray conditions nicely to you. And it is best to have a daily fluctuation to 60 degrees or lower at night. So again, your house temperature is probably awesome. If you have a light source and a heat mat and you turn off the lights and have it in a cool bedroom, you're going to get that heat fluctuation because the plants are going to want to see warmer, cooler, warmer, cooler.
For comparison, what is the temperature in the greenhouse?
The temperature in the greenhouses, it can range like a day to like today. It can be pretty cold if it's unheated, but it heats up pretty fast. I mean,
The heated one.
the heated ones, it depends what you're growing, right? And it depends how much money you want to spend on heat. Like the Florida High School greenhouse, we try to keep it above freezing inside, but we're using propagation mats to get the plant temperature warmer. Orchid people was Lisa. Lisa was probably heated higher. Yeah. In an orchid.
FYI, Harbor Freight sells a little handheld thermometer. Just hold in your hand like I could shoot it at that wall and read what the temperature at the top of that wall was 72. Or the other day I was digging in my garden and shot at the bottom of the hole. And so you can measure right next to
Like a
it.
laser temperature thermometer
It's a
thing?
little laser thing, 20 bucks.
Ooh,
It's a good,
someone write that down for me. I want that.
works on frying pans if you're cooking. Works on
Your grill. Yeah.
They're actually readily available.
Harbor Freight.
They're readily available anywhere.
Readily
You
available.
shouldn't have to pay under 20.
Don't,
I mean, over 20.
over 20. Don't pay over 20 and watch your shipping costs. You can find them, right? All right. So this table shows. Oh, one more. We'll talk about. The question was, if you have a heat mat, do you need a light? So we'll talk about that. So this is days of appearance of seedlings at various soil temperatures. So let's take tomato example because that's most commonly what people are trying to grow early in their house. So you'll see even at near 60 degrees, your peppers will germinate. They'll just take longer than if you have heat in the temperature they want it. So, you know, tomatoes might take a week at 68 degrees. Might take 2 weeks if at 60 degrees. If they're really cushy and happier and you're targeting more 80 degrees, it's going to take a few days less. So I think this was really encouraging to me to see the research on it and say, hey, I really can grow these things in my house and be successful. It might just take a little longer than what the package says because it's ideal germination temperatures and rates there.
Do the seeds, before they popped up, before they germinated, can you maintain the same temperature, or do they still want the drop at night?
Oh, do they still want the drop at night? So in my experiment, I did the drop at night all the way through. Yeah, because you're trying to mimic, outdoor daylight, regular conditions, so the fluctuation is good. However, if you don't have the timers in the setup and stuff, honestly, we don't. When we are growing at Philomath High School, the mats are just the same temperature. The air temperature fluctuates, but the mats, we don't have them. I don't put them on timers. I'm just afraid of them not turning back on. So these are examples of heat mats you can get. These tend to run about $20. They come in all sizes. The thermostat controller. So these run about $20 a piece. These run about $100 each, and you can daisy chain up to 4 or 5 of them. That's what we use at the Philomath High School greenhouse. These little thermostats run about $35. The timer. But you can get 70, 80 degrees with Christmas lights in the tub. I've done that before. You have the old weird colors or the ones with the big bulbs on them, and you're like, I'm going to put these into the recycle waste thing. I might as well try it. I burned out Christmas tree lights that way, but I wasn't going to get rid of them anyway. So, and it did. It brought it up to 75, 80 degrees easily. Not LEDs. No, these were the old, those colored big ones that I wasn't going to put on my tree because it fries the trees anyway. So Christmas lights in a tub, on top of the water heater, on top of the counter in the dishwasher in the kitchen. My husband didn't like that option so much. On top of the fish aquarium, I've told you that before. Other ideas for warm places to get things germinated? On top of the refrigerator, I'm too short for that. I can't see what's happening. I forget I'm up there. But yeah, that would work. So you just want a little bit of a boost. Oh, back to the heat mat, and I'll back up that. Okay, seeding soil. We talked about, or Janet talked to me at the beginning about what we want to hear in this. We want to hear about diseases and things that could happen. And well, if you start out with good materials, you're going to be less likely to see those issues come up. And soil is probably the most important thing to keep disease problems at bay. So the characteristics in a seeding soil is that it's going to hold moisture, drain quickly, be of fine texture if you're using very small seeds. Obviously, if you're doing cucumber seeds or melon seeds, the fine texture is not so important. Non-crusting, you want it to take the water up well. Especially though, you want it sterile. So you don't want the fungi and bacteria and weed seeds and everything else that might come in on your garden soil. And no fertilizer. Don't use garden soil? Why not? I just said it, I gave it away. Why not? It's not sterile. So you might have to spend a few dollars and go get some seeding soil. And it will be worth it in the long run. Also, when you're using seeding soil, it comes in those plastic bags. It's super dry and poofy. And if you just put your seeds into the poofiness and water it, what happens? It lifts up, and then it settles down. Right. So this is so poofy that it floats up. So I like to put this seeding soil in a bucket, pour water on it, mix it in, let it sit for a couple hours so that the mixture really soaks in. It's better if you do it the day before, bring it inside, don't let it be sitting outside in the garage and it's really cold. I mean, bring it up to temperature and let it come inside and get warm. So we've definitely done that at the Philomath High School greenhouse. Containers can be anything. It is not important. You'll see in my examples, I have the commercially available 6-packs. There's commercially available trays. My most favorite, so we teach a seed to supper class, which is for adult beginning gardeners on a tight budget. My absolute favorite, I've tried a lot of different things, is the toilet paper tubes wrapped in paper and push the seeding soil in hard, water it before you put in the seeds because the toilet paper tubes are going to take up water, and plant them in. So these are lettuce seeds that I planted in here 5 days ago and put under the lights. And I like these because the paper on the bottom is just paper, so when you go to plant them, they're super easy to plant. There's peat pots that are similar. You supposedly be able to plant in them. And I have problems with the peat pots because they dry, if they're above this soil level at all, they dry out. These you can rip open really easily and then plant your things in there. So if you're not doing large numbers of plants, these are super ideal. And you'll notice I have it in a salad container. So the salad containers give you the moisture retention when you're starting out, and then as soon as you see leaves coming up, take the lids off. So I've tried eggshells, egg halves, I've tried egg cartons, I've tried yogurt containers work great. They're just pretty big for, a seedling. So if you want to do multiple varieties of things, yogurt containers are kind of big. The question is, do I transplant them in the toilet paper containers? I usually rip them open and plant them like that, so that it's not going to constrict the roots. So, but I plant them. Well, it depends. Sometimes they just totally fall apart, right? Yeah. So that was packing paper that came in some shipment box that was sitting there. I don't get the newspaper anymore, but newspaper I used to use.
So you can lift them out without it all falling out?
Yes. All the paper does is hold the soil in at the bottom. You're right. You could just put toilet paper tubes right in there. Then another nice feature about these is they're kind of ridgy. So if you water it and you can see where the water is at the bottom, it's harder to overwater in these. I think that's the biggest mistake or the biggest hardship seedlings face, or seeds face in germination is they're too wet. People think they need to be watered every day, and they really don't need to be watered every day. You just want them kind of moist so you can touch them and they feel kind of moist. You don't want them dripping and standing in water. I mean, we kind of got ahead of ourselves a little. Because that's the next topic. Any other ideas on containers? Oh, coffee filters. Oh, okay. So water. We already started talking about water. Stay with moist, not dripping wet seeding mix. So I like to start with it already moist so I don't have to add a lot of water and end up overwatering. You want something to retain the moisture while the seeds are germinating. Water from the bottom up. That's especially important if you have small seeds that are going to float around. We've definitely done that with thyme. Some seeds like to have light to germinate. So literally, you pat them on top of the soil, and so if you go to spray around and then they run, you end up with thyme all in the corner or down the sides on the tray germinating. Water again when the soil is dry on top, so you really want to be feeling it, how wet it is. No standing water, that's the biggest thing. Again, don't have standing water underneath. Try to drain it off if you overwater, or maybe you have another container where you can move your pots into different containers so they're not standing or wet. Oh, this is a picture of, we just put in parsley, the 4-H club did. This is in the unheated greenhouse, but the water systems are technically they're on, but we don't need sprayers and drippers and everything going for seeding so much. So this is a capillary mat. It's a black felt-like material, but the point is that it's a wicking mat. So if you want to keep moisture without, so that the whole medium stays more humidified, you can put a mat, a wet towel, something underneath. You could put it in another tray. I've had wicking experiments go bad though. Like if the height levels are bad, you can get overflow if this is in a tray and they end up in standing water. So I use the same capillary method in the summer when I'm doing starts. I have a table in the shade, and I do a capillary mat out there. I have water that goes on a couple times a day, but again, I want the humidity there. And in June, when you're trying to get seeds started for your fall crops, it's really hard to keep them evenly moist, so I use the capillary mats for that too. But again, it doesn't have to be a high-tech capillary thing. It can be a towel. Air. So this is another thing that's going to really help your seedlings not develop diseases and other things, is have good air circulation. These little clip-on fans are super quiet. They're under $20 online. This one is one that is a brand that we use in the little greenhouse, in the 8x12 greenhouse. We have two, so it circulates the air in a clockwise fashion, and it's beautiful. Rub your hands daily over the seedlings, multiple times a day. If you're just walking by the room, just brush your fingers over them, because again, you're wanting to try to mimic what is going on outside. You know, the plants always have wind and weather buffeting them around, so you want to get them used to that, so when they go outside later, they won't have such a shock.
Are there other factors that keep a stem from getting rangy and elongated, like lighting, if the light's too far away? Or?
Yeah, light is the biggest thing about those stems getting rangy. So I'll show, and when we get to the stress factors, we're not quite there yet. I thought that was next, it's not. Nutrients, so you're going to start the seedlings in medium without fertilizer initially. And then when true leaves appear, so this is a blow up of a plant, probably pepper, I don't know. But you can see those true leaves coming out. So the seed leaves get the energy from the seed. But when you see the true leaves come out, I use a liquid fertilizer. You can use organic, it doesn't matter. They want the nitrogen. But you want to really dilute, because you don't want to burn your plants. So I end up putting like an eighth a teaspoon of these little crystal things into the watering thing. I mean, it seems crazy, but you don't want to burn them. Okay, this is my experiment. I did 3 vegetable varieties, the cool to medium to hot lovers. Again, I use those 6-pack trays. I put 2 seeds in each cell. You can see this one's on a mat. You can see that one's in my window. My window faces southeast. Obviously, I didn't want to set it on the floor right under there because it's not dark, so I put them on this little bench. My husband only knocked over things once. It's right because it's right by the doors, right? It's like, why is this here? This one, there wasn't enough room there. This one has bottom heat, 85 to 95 degrees. This one I did not use. This is this one. This says I did not use a thermostat, so if you were to not use the thermostat, you have not so much control. It says on the mat, on the directions, that it'll be 10 degrees above ambient, but my house is 64 degrees, so clearly it's more than 10 degrees above ambient. But again, you can't control that. You can see I use my meat thermometer. I didn't have one of those high-tech laser ones, but that's how I determined what the temperature was. Okay, this is my really not high-tech light system. My mom was cleaning out her stuff, and she said, "Hey, does anybody want these?" And I'm like, yeah. So I had 2 of them. One of them burned out, and I went to Home Depot, and it was going to be $8 for a bulb. I'm like, meh. This is an experiment. So then it went from 2 to 1. And you can see I have cardboard boxes. This is not high-tech stand with multiple adjustable chain link-esque things. This stand is a little harder to see. It is a more professional one with adjustable things on it. This one I have the big mat that we use over at Philomath High School with the thermostat on it set at 80 degrees. So this setup had 4 tubes. This had two 4-foot tubes with bottom heat. So this I was trying to mimic what anybody could do in their own house. You'll see in 3 weeks, the ambient heat, ambient light, those peppers didn't germinate. They're up now because I put them on the heat mat. I felt sorry for them. I felt really sorry for them. They're up now, but I didn't take another picture because that was cheater. You can see somebody's asking about legginess. So this was ambient light. You can see these are not strong stems. They're very, very weak stems. So sitting in my east and southeast windows was not adequate sunlight. So if you have south-facing windows with, angles on, all sides, you could probably do it, but not my windows.
When I was growing basil, I would rotate every day.
Oh, I rotated these poor babies. Oh, yeah. I just don't have, east, southeast light is
They were
just,
still pretty, they still looking at
Yeah.
that, but we would have been.
yeah. Now you can see, this is the one with the two that went down to 1 tube. And then you can see the one with the 80-degree heat and 4 tube. Much better. So, bottom line is I definitely need more light in my house. These are adequate. You can see at 3 weeks, the seed leaves coming out. You can see one, and another slow one. And actually there's other slow ones that came up in this one too. So they will grow. But clearly, the ones that got the most light and even heat did the best. And somebody asked about temperature. I targeted 80 degrees because it was cabbage, tomatoes, and peppers, so I wanted to be somewhere on the warmest side, but it's still in the range of all of them. Question over there?
You can have fluorescent tubes. I should mention that the LEDs that just have the little LEDs, I've been successful with those as well.
Okay.
Just the same application though, just like you have it close in.
Uh-huh.
They generate very little heat effect.
Oh, right. That's a good, I didn't mention that point too. So you'll notice, this one says ambient heat, 2 fluorescent tubes. Well, those 2 fluorescent tubes are 4 inches above the plants. It still is warming them. So the LEDs is not going to be, so these were warmer too. Even though I didn't give them additional heat, they were warmed up because of the 2 fluorescent tubes sitting right on top. And I didn't show you. So I have cardboard boxes and yoga blocks and, so that was the low-cost version as a stand. But yes, they do add heat. Fluorescent lights do add heat. So transplanting starts. After 2 or 3 true leaves show is when you can transplant them. And you can transplant them probably into larger containers. These were all seeded January 23rd. So obviously it's too cold to put them outside. But these are decent sizes. If I had started it in April, and this was May 1st coming into it, I could do that. And you can see I have 2 seeds in here. These are the actual plants that I transplanted 5 days ago. So you can see already that these are being stressed because when I put them in their own pot with fertilizer, I used an Osmocote. I'm not into doing fish stuff in my house. But you can see already that the size difference is big. So don't let them sit too long in the small cells. You think you're doing yourself a favor by starting things really early, but if you don't have the space to be able to pot them up, they get root bound and not happy. So pot them up. I always add fertilizer on transplanting. I still water with the dilute liquid stuff because that's more foliar feeding, but I also add fertilizer into the soil. So hardening off starts is really important. Sometimes the plant sail starts haven't been hardened off adequately. So it's difficult when the conditions outside are cold. And when you take plants home, assume anytime that, unless you're buying them outside, they've been sitting outside, assume that they probably haven't been hardened off adequately if you're buying it indoors anywhere. 4 to 7 days, you want to harden them off. Get them acclimated gradually. Each of these steps can take 1 to 2 days to do. So reduce the watering. Move the plants in and out, in and out, in and out. So during the day, they can be outside for a few hours, but don't put them in direct sunlight starting out. The difference between, 2 fluorescent bulbs and sunlight is huge. I don't know scientifically what that is, but You don't want to put them out straight into the sun. They'll really fry. Bring them in during the night. You know, if you can bring them into the garage or a protected area, or if you can have them outside and you can drape a picnic table or a chair or something, so they're protected at night. So gradually lengthen the time that they're out there, then remove it, cover permanently and transplant to the garden. So you can use fabric over hoops. You use a cold frame, a picnic table under the deck. I mean, on the deck under the picnic table works great. So, you need to get light. That's the biggest factor. Heat is an optional. Use that fine, sterile seed mix. And don't water too much. Provide good air, movement, and nutrients. So, go.
On the sterile soil,
Uh-huh.
I take mine in my barbecue, I have used stuff.
Okay, so he sterilizes his own in his barbecue. Man, it smells bad. I mean, sterilizing soil smells bad. I didn't do this personally. My sister-in-law did it in her oven in her kitchen. Oh, it was really bad. So if you have an outdoor way to do it, that's awesome. You know, you need to target above 140 degrees for some length of time. I can't remember, but you can do it.
So I would use some seedling mix, and I put it in a Pyrex dish and put it in the microwave for 5 minutes.
Oh.
And it got to 200 degrees, and I didn't have a problem with the odor.
Okay, she used the seedling mix and put it in a Pyrex dish and put it in the microwave for 5 minutes, and it got up to 200 degrees, and she did not have the problems.
And that was because you were reusing the seed starter mix, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't your own compost or something, it didn't smell like the starter mix.
Right, so it was a sterile mix that had grown seeds in it, and she re-sterilized it.
I had not used sterile soil. I get virgin potting soil out of the bag, and I haven't had too much of a problem.
Oh.
It doesn't grow, it works.
Any potting soil in a bag is sterile. They don't have weed seeds or anything in there. Sometimes they'll have mycorrhizal fungi added into mixes, but anything in a bag that you buy commercially is, for our purposes, sterile. Yeah. Yes, Linda. And then, so the question is, do you need to sterilize a previously used six-pack? You know, the official answer is yes. 10% bleach for 30 minutes. That's the official answer. Do I do that all the time?
When you add the fertilizer, you adding it every time you water your
Yes.
seeds?
So the question is, do I use fertilizer? So once the two true leaves appear, I'm using that really dilute fertilizer in the water every time I water. Yes.
When you transplant your tree starts to like the 4-inch pot, what kind of soil do you use for that?
The question is, what kind of soil that goes into this 4-inch pot? So this is just regular potting soil, so it's the bigger, chunkier stuff. And then I use the Osmocote in with it. So you can try using the organic fertilizers and things. We didn't have as good luck in cooler conditions, and I'm not sure why, but inside it should be okay. What? Oh, sorry.
Can you explain to me why you sterilize seedling mix?
Why use sterilized seedling mix? So seedling mix is any commercially available thing is not going to have weed seeds in it, and it's not going to have the living live stuff in it. Because when you bring any kind of living live stuff, like if you were to mix your own compost into a seedling mix, then you do see benefits to that. I've seen studies where they add compost or worm castings or other things, and you can get beneficial fungi. But in general, you don't want to be introducing things that you're going to give ideal conditions to, growing conditions to, and then take off. So we'll get into that a little more as we talk about signs of stress in your seedlings, what could go wrong. So Watch for stress signs. You just don't ever want to see this, right? Oh. Okay, so we talked about the plants, and what do they look like when they don't have enough light? They get elongated, the nodes, the internodes, or at least just the stem gets super long, and they start leaning towards the light. So anytime you see a plant leaning towards light, I mean, this applies to little seedlings, or this applies to in your yard, in your landscaping, right? It's not getting enough light. It's not happy if it's leaning to the sun. This one obviously has a lot of seeds going on in it. So there could be multiple factors. You know, whenever you have things competing for resources, you know, the roots are competing. They're competing for the sunlight. So that's why thin plants might be an idea. Also, if it's a cool crop and you're overheating it, and low light, it can accentuate the problem. So that's why lower the heat is probably not the issue here, because those ranges are pretty big that they can germinate in. Stress signs is looking at the color of your plants. So in these pepper plants, you can see they're kind of yellowish. So that would be a nutrient deficiency. So you want to fertilize them more. So if you're seeing that your really dilute solution is still giving you plants that are looking really pale or yellow, just up maybe instead of an eighth a teaspoon, you put in a quarter teaspoon. Again, you don't want to fry them, but you want to give them adequate nutrition. So this is what one of the first years that I grew tomatoes for the Master Gardener plant sale. They kind of all looked like this. And another Master Gardener brought some of the plants that she had grown in her greenhouse. They were green and lush, and I was like, wow, why? And when she transplanted, she puts her own compost into the transplant pot. So you can do that too, instead of just using straight potting soil. If you add compost, that'll help. These are totally nitrogen deficient. So any kind of fertilizer with nitrogen in it is going to make these tomato plants much happier. So another stress sign, it's pretty easy to imagine what happened here. So mold grows in the moist, warm conditions very readily. So overwatering can be an issue. Same thing, the algae growing on the soil surface. This can happen, and the plants can look fine. So sometimes you just have to look at your plants too. But generally, overwatering and poor drainage is going to be the cause of things like this. So use less water, or water less frequently. You know, do the touch test. Does it still feel moist? Don't let the water pool. Again, no standing water. Increase the air circulation. The severe stress, death. So seeds rot before they germinate, so they just don't come at all. The shoots decay before they emerge. Or this is what I've seen more commonly, is that they just like all of a sudden, I mean literally one day you come in and they're just like, done. So that's a damping off, usually caused by fungus, but there's multiple reasons that can occur. And really, once you can't save them when they're like that. I mean, so really you need to prevent that from occurring, and that's, I guess, the main reason you would use a sterile soil, is so you don't have the bad fungus or whatever in your mix. Use clean tools, sterilize those containers, use new seedling mix. I mean, if you just really, really, really don't want to risk it, just start out with new seedling mix. But certainly if you cook it to 200 degrees, nothing's going to be alive in there if you're using used stuff. Water keep moist, not soggy, ensure good drainage, and provide great light. So hopefully we're preventing those things from coming out. Any questions on propagation stuff before we move into seeds? Seeds, I love this picture. I love seeds. Every time this year I so for the giving garden, you know, I go through all the seeds and have them all over the living room. Last night my husband was like, this needs to go away. It's like, I'm almost done with the inventory. I'm almost done. So I did. I put them away this morning. So what seeds seeds can be started indoors and what should be started outdoors. So for the reasons we talked about earlier, those cool crops, we didn't focus on so much, but if you want to get an earlier start, the cool crops, the coles, the broccoli, cabbage, kales, chard, you can also start inside, lettuce, onions, parsley, be started inside, and of course, the things that we always think about, peppers, tomatoes, melons, and basil. The things that really should not be attempted inside, I mean, you might be able to do it, but things that do better when seeded directly outdoors, the things that Janet Troop was talking about last week, really are the root crops, because the transplantation process disrupts them. I've tried to move things, when you're thinning radishes. Has anybody tried transplanting? Not so successful. Even when you're taking them from here to here, yeah, just eat your thinnings. Don't try to transplant them. So root crops grow outside, legumes, beans and peas. It always kind of slightly kills me when I see them really expensive in the nurseries. I mean, beans and peas are super easy to start outside direct seeded, and I don't think there's much advantage to starting it inside. I do have my 4-H kids, like for cucumbers and mostly cucumbers and melons and squash, I'll have them do that experiment. Start some inside, transplant them, because transplant shock is a real thing, especially for these melons, cucumbers, and squashes. So I usually say, okay, do your thing in the greenhouse, but at the same time plant seeds side by side, and a lot of times they catch up. So you're not really getting an early start because you're shocking them when you move them outside. Other cool crops, spinach, dill, cilantro. I've tried starting those in the greenhouse and they just bolt. So for whatever reason, the amount of sun or the amount of heat or something, I don't know the scientific background of those, but I find it very difficult to grow those indoors. And the big things like corn that like a lot of nutrients and stuff, it's better direct seeded. Just wait till it's warm enough and direct seed them. There's exceptions to all of these things. Shika.
So you have cilantro under cool crops.
Mm-hmm.
So how early can you actually throw seed out for cilantro?
How early can you throw seed out for cilantro? October. I have a great patch of cilantro because I kind of was lazy and I didn't clean up a patch of cilantro and parsley last fall. And so as I'm cutting them down, they're dropping seeds all over. Oh my gosh, the cilantro I've been eating for over a month is beautiful. It's about this tall now, and cutting them, it's gorgeous. So the real cool crops that can take some frost will seed around, like parsley, dill. Dill, not so good, but you can do it now. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, some things really don't need to be babied. They just go. It's a miracle. That's the cool thing about growing things and growing things from seeds. I mean, it's just little miracles every day. Here's one of the resources. So growing your own this is listed on your paper, but growing your own is an OSU extension publication. The thing I use the most out of this publication is this table, dates for planting vegetables in Oregon. I didn't ask the question. I assume everybody's kind of from the Willamette Valley, not east or somewhere. But this will tell you, tomatoes, start plants indoors long before the planting date. Tomatoes, 8 weeks. So in region 2, where we are, it says transplant them in May, so back up 2 months, 8 weeks. Right? So you can start those in March. If you already started them in January, you're going to be transplanting them to bigger and bigger containers, right? I do know people who always start their tomatoes in January, but they want a few big specimens that they're going to protect when they transplant outside, and they're starting out big. So, things you can start now indoors. All the cool crops, the parsley, although you can throw that outside now. Onions. Onions are awesome to start now. I just take one yogurt container and throw a bunch in there. You can put 50 seeds in one container because they come up really skinny and small, and you can get onions pretty easily. So green onions I use a lot. So I succession start onions year round that way. I just throw them in a little yogurt cup and have little starts going. So when you're harvesting things out of your garden, you don't know what, you didn't do the garden planning. You could put in the green onions in there and just have them all the time. So it's a little early yet for peppers and tomatoes, but you can start those in mid-March. I mean, unless you have great space that you can grow them inside. Cucumber, squash, and pumpkins, you don't want to get them root bound at all. So really, you're talking 3 weeks before you can transplant them. So look on the chart, it says don't transplant till mid-May. Well, you don't want to be seeding them until, mid-April, late April. But I love this chart in this guide.
Question. Maybe so when you said onions there, you were talking about green onions?
Oh, any onions you could do that with. But green onions you can plant later into the year. If you're doing bulbing onions, they really need to be early.
Okay.
Or overwintered.
Okay.
Right.
And do people just plant bulb onions because they're easy and you have them, or?
The question is, who plants bulb onions? See, not so many people plant bulb onions.
That's what I was.
Yeah, I can never get Walla Wallas to be as big as what you can buy in the store. And they take a really, really long time. So I tend to mostly grow green onions and I overwinter leeks, but not so much of the bulbing ones. Oh, overwintered Walla Wallas can get giant. Oh my gosh. So when you plant them. So you started them in October and overwintered those large onions. So you have to plant ahead. If you want to have overwintering crops, you need to plant ahead. Nancy? Can you transplant parsley? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, you can transplant parsley. Parsley is a biennial. So the parsley that you had from last year will all of a sudden send up a stalk. So if you want to have those seeds, save those seeds, but the leaves start getting real woody and a little potent. So I usually try to use parsley 1 year, and then save the seeds, but always have some going on. So life expectancy of vegetable seeds. This chart I have printed off, so did I include it? Okay, I included it in your handout. This chart is super helpful if you can have self-control. And don't say, literally, I just threw away seeds from 2013 last night. Do you think that that's going to be ideal conditions? No. So store your seeds in a dry, cool, dark place. They talk about using desiccants and putting them in the fridge, and I keep them in a little plastic box that has dividers in it in the basement. But you want to keep them in a cool, dark. I don't keep them out in the garden shed. That gets way too hot, or way too cold and too damp. But I keep my New Year's resolution for late is to keep this in with the seed boxes, so that when I get a new packet of seeds, like I just went through and wrote down 2019. How long will these tomatoes last? 5 seasons. Okay. And 2024, throw them away. Don't even look at them. Throw them away. And you don't even want to give them away, right? You say, oh, I could give this to somebody else. I could send them to, the Corvallis garden share, whatever. Not really. You want people to be successful. You want people to be happy growing seeds. And you always think, oh, just give it to the 4-H kids. No, we want the 4-H kids to have success. We don't want them to be disappointed or have plants that have less vigor or don't come up at all. That's even sadder.
Is it appropriate to store seeds in plastic, or does it need to be a breathable container?
Does it need to be a breathable container? So most of the seeds I have are already dry or they're commercially available. So putting things that are dry into plastic are okay. Seed saving is a totally another topic. Seed saving, you'd want to make sure they're completely dry before putting them into plastic, because otherwise you'll get moldy seeds and seeds that are not going to be, what's the word I want? Viable. So the ones that are most obviously go bad fast And then when you see the chart, you go, oh, that makes sense, right? Onions and parsley. They're just, I don't ever grow parsnips, so I don't know about parsnips. I don't know what salsify is. But yeah, onions and parsley. Yeah, don't try to save the seeds. If you're not going to use them all, share them. If you're not going to use them all in this season, because they won't be good. And the germination rates go down. I didn't put it in. I usually, with the 4-H club, I usually have them, each year I get new kids that come in. And so we'll do a germination experiment, and we'll do, the really old. So that's why I keep some really old seeds around. It's the tomato seeds from 2013 compared to the tomato seeds from 2020. Take 10, compare them, see how they look, so that kids understand that seeds are not always great. The other take-home lesson here is when you're out planting your seeds, don't have wet hands and get the envelope all wet and then put the seed envelope down on the wet ground. And, that's like my pet peeve. So I always make the kids take around a plastic tub tray that's big and just, put your seeds back in there. Don't set them on the ground, because once you get damp, if they start to germinate, and they won't be viable later.
So you said that when the seeds get old, they're not going to be as viable, they'll germinate less. But if they do germinate and come up, are there studies that show that those plants would be less robust?
Yes, she's asking a vigor question if you have old seeds. So I did not do the research on that. So I know from experience that the ones that, if you're seeding out 100-something plants, there's always some that come up runty or weird looking. And they don't really recover very well. But that's only my experience. That would be a good thing to look up and look at not only viability, but how robust they are. Vigor. Yes?
The research shows they do not have, in general,
They do not have as much vigor.
the ones that do germinate of old stock.
Okay.
But that may be all you have.
Right.
So, for example...
Right, if you have some family secret
Well, they
seed.
tried to recover the New Jersey tomato that was very popular. It's actually at the Rutgers University website. Very interesting.
Oh, okay.
But they could only find seeds from 1950s that Campbell Soup still had to give to farmers who wanted to grow seeds for their plants, their production. But it's a very interesting story recovering what they now market as several varieties of New Jersey tomato.
Right, so the reason to keep seeds for longer than what the charts say is if it's a rare seed or a family secret or something special. But then you would want an open pollinated variety that you can get the vigor going again on that. Alan?
Salsify has been grown out at the demo garden for the last 2 or 3 years. I'm sure it will be grown again this year. If
What
you
is
want to come
salsify?
out and see it.
What is it?
It is a it is quite interesting tasting. It is something that John Kimmerling found
That's John.
and has been growing it. He grows it at his house, and so he's been growing it.
Oyster plant back in colonial times.
Oh.
It's a green, right?
It's a bulb, it has a bulb and when you cook it has a little bit of oyster.
Oh.
It has to be peeled.
And a little slippery.
I know.
It's a little slippery.
Oh. So if you're Kelly. So that's a very good question. So Kathleen's asking whether vegetable seeds generally need to be, the word just went out of my head. It starts with an S. Scarified. Well, you have to do something to encourage germination. So in general, the seeds that we grow in the greenhouse do not need to be treated beforehand because they're all annuals. But things I do is to soak seeds like peas and beans ahead of time for 24 hours. I do soak the parsley for 24 hours ahead. Janet Troop, where's she at? I was reading her notes from last week. It says, pour boiling water over your parsley seeds that you planted. I was like, whoa. So I've never taken boiling water out into the garden. However, in growing flower seeds, especially perennials, they really do a lot of times need scarifications, pre-treatments. Last year I did a little tiny, very short foray into trying to do some native seeds. And there was lupins. You literally pour boiling water into a cup with the lupin seed. It was quite scary, but they did great. So different seeds required. Obviously, if they go through an entire winter freeze-thaw, it's going to be difficult to do in your house kind of conditions. So flowers and perennials and other things, natives, are going to be a little different. So seed sources, these are local-ish companies. Territorial has a lot of seed growing information in their catalog, so it's very, I keep that in the shed. So I literally will look up things because they have every kind of vegetable category, so if I just want to know general information about how much to fertilize or what requirement seeds will need, that's a good one to do. I didn't talk about labeling. Label your starts so you know what they are. There's no labels in these. That's a bad example. Because you won't remember what they are. You think, oh, I'll remember, but you won't remember. So if you like seed stories, what did I do? And you like open pollinated sources, adaptive seeds out of Sweet Home, they do have those. This was ancient from, some Polish farmer lady who bought them from her hometown. Well, I mean, they have amazing stories in there. So if you want to branch out into doing your own plant breeding or just saving seeds, that is a great source. Wild Garden Seeds does their own seeds and selections as well. Territorial has a lot of big fields where they grow, and Time Garden also grows a lot of the stuff that they have seeds for. Resources you have listed. And plant sales are the first 2 weekends in May. So happy vegetable growing this year.
I have some tomatoes from Rutgers University seed catalog. Afterwards, if anyone wants to share.
Ruby, would you turn on the lights, please?
Right here's Rutgers tomatoes seed information.
One way I have hooked up lights over my seedlings, I have some sawhorses, and I hang the lights in between the sawhorses, and then I can heighten the light fixtures as the seedlings grow, and that doesn't take up very much room. But if I think of it, I'm going to take a picture of my seed starting table my mother built for me many years ago. She's a contractor's wife, and so we always had leftover wood, and she made this 2-tiered growing structure for me, and it has hooks so that I can hook the lights on that and move them up and down. So I'll try to remember to take a picture because it's very clever. Thank you, Jennifer. That was terrific, wasn't it?